Also, I've been reading like I can't remember the name for what when they take down what everyone says, but I read a bit of that, and at times and I read an article about it. At times it appeared people were just the justices were joking almost, but they were like laughing about it. And did you get that from them?
I wouldn't say joking, but they clearly understood that this is a First Amendment issue and not some other issue that may be kind of related to it or not against it. I mean, they clearly understood that it was a First Amendment issue and that they're singling out video games for one thing. And then it was a very broad definition of violence. What is constituted violence? I mean, it was basically any act crude or unusual to a human image. And this is an image now, not a human being or a realistic human. It was a human image. So, I mean, the stick fighter games could be considered that. I mean, that's the basic form of a human image.
Human image often also means then obese people are a crude, unusual human image. So, I mean, California, get smart. Define your terms.
Okay, there are a couple hands in front.
First of all, when you were saying if retailers don't carry things, then we'll stop making it. That's right at all. Just look at the success of Steam right now. Online buying will...
But Steam would, let's, worst case is, it goes for California's law. All the other states are going to issue other laws like this, especially the ones who tried before. And my guess is because if some of the bigger states, the most popular states where the sales happen, Walmart and Target and places aren't going to make an adult section for video games. Walmart won't because they have that image. We want to be family friendly, so they're not going to do it. Now, Steam still has to follow the law and make sure they're selling games to people, or violent video games to people over the age of 18. Now, if Steam will do that, I mean, I don't know. Well, that's the thing, you can't, but since the law has penalties of $1,000 per instance, and who knows what else is going to happen with that, are they going to take the chance? I'm going to say most retailers aren't going to take the chance.
Someone else in front here.
Last year, I attended a moot court creation of the case. Late last year, I attended a moot court the case at William & Mary Law School. And one of the things I noticed that Fisher's counsel in a lot during the arguments he presented for was they were talking a lot about the game Postal 2. Exclusively about Postal 2, with the implication that every single emulated game available today is at the same level of violence as Postal 2. In fact, it's not even available on store shelves. And when there's any advertising for cherry picking, it's the extremely unusual violence.
Jackbox and GTA.
Let's not mention this name.
I want to come back to that point later on when we talk about how we can get involved and start to change these narratives. So I'm going to come back to that later. But we had one more. We had one on the end here.
Oh, I understand.
To behind you. Good.
Yeah, I think what you're saying about them making a separate section, I think that's correct because I don't think a lot of people know the highest rating the ESRB can give is not M, it's A. And no game, you don't see any store stock. I don't believe any games come out that are rated that because most stores will not stock. They have a policy against stocking adult games.
It's actually a policy of Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony to not even allow adult-rated games to play on their systems.
So I think that you're making a point there that if they do that same thing with violence, they do with sex now, it's going to put it in that same section, and we already have seen that these stores won't stock those games.
Yeah, he's right. That's the law says you cannot sell, display, market to children, for people under 18, for violent video games. So no more commercials for years of war commercials. I love their commercials. Hated the game, I love their commercials.
What we'll see happen to video games, especially that's under the M or like the A rating. It could be that something that happens to modern cinema when the MPAA signs an NC-17. It's just like slow death. No company's going to back a movie with that kind of a rating because you're not going to get the audiences in the seats, and then they're not going to get wide release, and it's going to be the same level. But I think that for me, my biggest question, maybe you guys can speak to this later in the panel, is like there's this whole kind of like mystical way in which movies like the MPAA assigns these ratings to movies, and I kind of feel that there's the same level of distance for how the rating system works for games. Like, I don't understand, like, is there a rubric? Well, if the F word is used 18 times, it's going to be this, or if there's this many boosts, it's this, or if they're rendered this many, it's
One rule is
that. I mean, like, I don't understand. You see what I'm saying? Like, who is in charge of making these decisions, and how are these decisions assigned?
I do understand, and I'm going to go really quickly on how the MPAA, AA, and the ESRB rate how they're rated. With movies, it's a lot easier. They can watch the movie. You know, most movies, what, 2 to 3 hours? I mean, we're not going to have a long movie going on here. And it's based on the anonymous raters, how they feel. How they feel if they're the mother or the father and their kids, or how they thought. And it's I don't know what the sample size is. That may be an issue, and that may be the bigger problem we have is a small sample size. But it's the consensus that everyone gives it the rating. And while we, in the past, I would say, decades, we've seen ratings kind of change. PG-13 can now have some certain cuss words, and it's so many times they can say a cuss word. You know, rated R, you know, have full sexual action basically going on as long as you don't see any of the private parts for some reason, or at least the male private parts. ESRB does the same thing except for being a video game. There's no way that most of these games can be rated in a time period that they need to rate them in. So what happens is the publishers or / developers submit the worst parts of the game in video form, with a synopsis of basically the game, and a few of the things that they think are issue creases. And it's the same thing. It's the anonymous raters, their best feeling in how they would rate this game. They actually give also markers of identification like, you know, drug use, you know, bloody violence, but animated bloody violence, or whatever, you know, descriptions on the back, cartoon violence.
Doesn't that seem problematic though? If you're taking a really small sample size, it's the same with any kind of junk science. It's like, if we put 10 people in a room together and 7 of them lost weight, well cool, you did 10 people. Like, really, you know what I mean? I think that when it comes to that kind of like limited scope of understanding the game, and even if you say that the manufacturers submit the worst part of the game, well who is it deciding that what's worse and what's not worse? I mean, especially with the MPAA, I think you get like, you know, they're making like 30 grand a year and they're soccer moms, and it depends on who gets, you know, who gets lumped into this, and you know, they watch these films and they have these note sheets, and it really depends on how much studio backing goes into a film as to where that rating's going to end up. So.
That's a good point. We want to get back to that, but we need to move on because there's 2 hands and I want to take that real quick, and then we're going to move on to how to get involved and how to change things. So we're going to show them the glasses in the long hair.
Okay. Yeah. About what others have mentioned, the AO rating, the NC-17. Shouldn't we like? Isn't that sort of like a vicious cycle for those things? Is the reason like the stores and no one wants the AO games is because like back earlier on those games were basically like pornography and they didn't want that, and now it could possibly get there because of violence and something similar from NC-17. No one puts the support behind it because it doesn't do well. And same thing with the AO. Shouldn't we be looking for some ways of perhaps breaking the cycle and showing that it's not like it doesn't have to be a kiss of death for that?
I mean, yes, it's certainly something we as a community of gamers can try to work on. The first thing we're going to have to do is convince Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo to allow adult-rated games to even play on their consoles, you know, right out of the box, which just right now doesn't happen. You have to hack it. You have to mod your console to even get past that rating thing. And as soon as they do, there probably are a few retailers out there who would have and willing to make a special section just for those games, and maybe some of these developers made this design for it. I mean, some of them may say, well, you know, we like our game the way it is. It's nothing bad. You know, we can like rename a drug and we'll pass them the M-rated, M17 rating. It's like, but we don't want to do that. We want to make this for everyone 18. They actually make it. That is going to be a hard battle, I have to say, just because the big retailers, they want to have the family-friendly image, and they're not going to try to do it. There may be a niche market, I don't know. Well, I'm not in the industry to tell you that. So.
Well, what I mean is like for the NC-17 stuff, there's like sometimes they go and they make something and they didn't think it was that bad, and then they get an NC-17 rating. And like, well, we have to like make changes to this, like, and do it to get that lower R. And sometimes it's also between like an R and a PG-13 thing, because that can mean the difference of millions of dollars for it.
And that happens in games too.
Yeah,
the bigger problem though is if you have a movie that's NC-17, you can make a DVD. Every DVD in the world will play it. You can't do that with games, unfortunately.
You could put it on the PC.
That PCs would be the only system that would make it, and then I think the bigger problem in there is someone will need to establish some type of market so people know. I don't know how many people here are PC gamers. I'm mostly a full PC gamer, but we're outnumbered by the consoles. At least 75%.
Wait, one more here. This guy again. In white, then.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like ESRB. I know it's not a perfect rating system to have 10 people watch the worst parts of the game, but it's really the only system you can have now because there's hundreds of games being released, and you couldn't rate them like a movie. You couldn't have the soccer mom go through Final Fantasy, whatever, because it's going to take forever. And that's if she's even, if she can even get through the game. So in order for time and money, you have to have a limited size and show something that you know they're going to say.
Yeah, and to keep talking about ratings, video games have a much more comprehensive rating system than any form of media, and I think that publishers are really good at knowing the parts that they need to figure out the movie.
They also are really good at what they need to do, and they're also the one rating system that's enforced the best. The FTC is like 83% of the retailers will enforce the ratings and sell content from movie theaters and DVD people.
Not when I'm at GameStop, they don't.
Not GameStop, well.
I'm like, it's legal to sell. I'm not a minor, but
it is perfectly legal to sell a game, but most of them signing up the ESRB or the SA state that they will enforce the rating systems, and if they are a member, there's fines and things if they don't follow the rating system at the point of sale, and the same for developers if they don't submit the one scene that everyone's up in arms, they can be re-rated and they can be fined for it.
I'll come back to that. We want to move on. So I think everyone in this room is probably in agreement that gamers are getting the shaft. Yes. Okay. If anyone disagrees, you can raise your hand.
Games have been getting the shaft for a long time.
That's what I was going to say.
So what we want to do for the last 20 minutes of this panel is talk about how to organize, how to change that narrative in the media, and who is already working to do that, and how to get in touch with them, and how you can be that person in your own community, in your own land group, and really build a movement to change that. So I see some hands going up. If you guys can just let me talk for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to come back and free speech. Yeah, you can talk louder. Okay, so there's things that there's always. Who here is familiar with a few names here? Who knows who Marshall Gantz is?
I know who Jack Thompson is.
Who knows who Cesar Chavez is? And does anyone know Saul Alinsky?
Never heard.
Any of those names? Well, all three of these gentlemen are kind of revolutionary minds in how to organize your community. Cesar Chavez was one of the first great union organizers in the country. In a time when workers have been getting the shaft forever, he went out and organized them and fought back. Saul Alinsky, he wrote a book called Rules for Radicals. In the 60s, he wrote this book as basically a how-to guide to changing your government, how to organize around peace, and the first person I said was Marshall Gantz. Marshall Gantz is a professor at Harvard University. For 25 years, he went out into the field to talk to progressive organizations, from free speech organizations to equal rights organizations, and he studied what they did that works.